together one more time. One more time. One more time. He allowed us to shout together one more time. One more time. Yes, sir. Hallelujah. One more time. He allowed us to shout together.
Yes, indeed. One more time, right here at VMC Planet Radio. He allowed us to be together one more time. Thank you so much for joining us. It is exactly 16:05, right here at VMC Planet Radio, or 16 minutes past 5. It is the making a difference in education and training. On the 10th, today is the 10th of April 2025. I'm not alone today. I've got a guest, a very good friend, I suppose, of the show. This is the second time I'm actually talking to him. We are on the internet. We are on the World Wide Web. It is www.vmcplanetradio.co.za. And we'd like to say thank you so much for the crew. It's E2 and Becky for Route 325 right here at VMC Planet Radio. The show is called Making a Difference in Education and Training. You might be surprised why we say made and we're not pronouncing the T. It is actually a silent T. You know, you've got words like duvet where you don't pronounce the T. But it does not mean that when you speak English, you're not supposed to pronounce the T, because how the hell are you going to say tomato? I've got Greg. Greg, good afternoon. How are you doing?
Hey, Stan. I'm very well.
I'm very well, man. I'm excited that you are here. And I'm so happy that you can be able to join us today. Because the previous time, I had a lot of questions for you.
Yep.
And a lot of people were very surprised that there can be a profession that has to do with corrosion.
Yeah, corrosion is something very much underrepresented. Definitely. Yeah.
Which for me, it boggles my mind, right?
Okay.
I will tell you why. I've seen in places, in fact, in KZN, there's a place where they build a train station with just steel,
yes,
but they let the steel be, and it keep on changing color year after year. And I think that steel is corroding.
Absolutely. That's when we talk about steel and iron, we call it rust. But all the other metals we call corrosion. But definitely, when it reacts with its environment, that's corrosion, and it's destroying our infrastructure.
Wow. Okay. You know what? I think today I'm going to learn quite a lot of things. So, Greg, let's start from the beginning. Your name is Greg.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And I suppose it stands for Grigory.
You're so right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, does it mean you are such a flexible person?
Yeah, I'm very open-minded. I like people and communication. I'm very flexible with that. Yeah.
You know the reason I'm saying that, because it will be very difficult for a person to be, to feel free to talk to you when you say your name is Grigory.
As soon as they get to know me, they'll know I can talk to you.
So because I'm finding it very interesting that anybody that is flexible in this life, who is amiable, convivial in nature, they make things easier for people. Even when you talk to them from a distance, you can feel their smile.
Absolutely. I've got a passion for carrying this information over and transferring it to other people. So the only way I can do that is if I'm open-minded and I can talk to everybody.
But tell me something. You started by working, you then train people.
Yep.
The transition, is it easy?
Actually, I've never stopped working as well, because there's always new things to learn. And take what I learn outside and take it into the students and to people that I'm training. You'd be surprised that one of the subjects that I had at university, I went to Pretoria University to do chemical
UP.
engineering. Yeah. And in those days, it was an Afrikaans university, and I struggled with some of the language issues because being English speaking, I didn't know the maths language in Afrikaans.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So I know and I understand nowadays the non-native English-speaking South African and coming to university, and he's got his cultural language like Venda, or he doesn't know the English that I speak in terms of corrosion, so I've got to make it easy for him.
Exactly.
You know, and that's what my aim is. But one of the interesting facts about me is that, yes, I was kicked out of university twice because and one of the subjects that I really struggled with was in Afrikaans. I'm going to give you the English name, and that was material science and corrosion. And I don't know if I'm ashamed to say or happy to say, I failed it 4 times in a row, and they kicked me out of university because of that. And look at me today. I eventually passed it with a supplementary exam, and I've made corrosion my life. I learned quite a lot about it. So I struggled quite a bit, but I managed to get there.
You know what makes me laugh is that there was somebody, I remember some time ago, I think this person was stunned. He didn't know what to say. And then he says, no, you know what, let me leave it. I don't want to speak with people who has got, a corroded mind. so it just remind me of, of that. But like of all things you could learn, Greg, in this world.
Yeah.
You chose corrosion. Why?
Yeah, well, I always wanted to be involved in chemistry all my life. From about 4 or 5 years old, I used to get my mom to get me chemistry sets whenever she got an opportunity and things like that. And then in the old day, we had to do national service, and I joined the police to do that. And after 2 years, I always used to tell my students, after 2 years, 4 days, 17 hours, 24 minutes, and 32 seconds, I transferred into the South African Navy, and everything rusts at the sea. So what they did is I became the officer in charge of the materials laboratory, of which corrosion was one of the things. And I started to learn quite a lot with that. And then the Navy appointed a guy from the CSIR to be my mentor, Dr. Brian Callahan, who was Mr. Corrosion in South Africa at the time, And Brian would sit on the other side of the desk, like as far as what you are from me. And whenever he went to go look at some corrosion problem, I would tag along, and vice versa. And we used to crawl through a lot of dirt and whatever to get to the corrosion.
But no, you see, which is very good, because I'm finding this thing to be very interesting, right? Because the first time I heard about corrosion as a career, for instance, right, the study thereof, was when I was speaking to you during that summit there, boot camp.
Okay. Yep.
And ever since, I was so intrigued, and I will tell you why. Because a lot of people started to ask me. In fact, I'm going to try and see if we can go through some of the questions.
Okay.
Right? But one of the questions was that, does this thing have age now? Do you get to a stage where you say, I'm too old to start studying this thing?
I don't like... First of all, I don't like the word retirement. I don't think I'll ever retire.
All right.
And there's so much rust and corrosion around that there's always going to be work. It's about thermodynamics. I don't know if anybody understands thermodynamics. Everything.
Perhaps if you can explain, just for my benefit.
Yeah. Okay, the simplest part of this is that everything wants to go down to the lowest energy level. It strives to go down to the lowest energy level. That's the second law of thermodynamics. And so when we take ore out of the ground, we mine it, we're adding energy to it, and then we refine it, we make metals out of it, we're adding energy to it, and all it wants to do for the rest of its life is go back down to the lower energy level.
Oh, okay.
So that is what causes corrosion. Obviously, we have some materials like gold and platinum that are already at their lowest energy level at normal atmospheric conditions.
Okay.
And so they don't want to go any further. But steel, very reactive. Aluminium, very reactive. Zinc, things like that. And so that's in a nutshell why things rust. They just want to go back down. And then what we do is we employ methods to slow it down. So we paint it, we use corrosion inhibitors, which interferes with a chemical reaction, or we apply a technique called cathodic protection, which is a electrochemical way of doing it. So we force the reactions on the surface to go the other way. You can't do that as a blanket thing. You have to learn quite a bit about it before you can do it.
So that you have an understanding. I will give you an example. I've got a cast iron pot.
Yes.
You know the one they use for poiki?
Where is it? With a poiki?
I don't have the poiki, but it's a very funny thing that my wife doesn't like poiki. She thinks that there's too many things that, because you see the African people, they just black them alles aanmekaar. So that, because I think there's a science behind keeping it, at this. I don't know whether you say, because I want to use your word, to slow down the corrosion, to keep it at perhaps the way in which you still can be able to utilize it.
Yeah.
So at one stage we were told that you need to use, pork.
The oil, the fat on
the fat, right? After you clean it and then you just smear it with it. Or you can use any oil, but they say with oil, they don't guarantee that it won't rust.
Yeah.
So when you're saying this thing that it wants to go back to its original state, now I'm thinking when you slow down, there are certain things that you need to do. You mentioned painting as one of them. So, but for things like cast iron pot, what are the things that you do? Do you coat it?
Yeah, well, people have had these cast iron poikies for 100 years, even longer, and they've learned by now that if you put pork fat in it and you smear it on the inside, it actually stops the corrosion. And then how does that work? We want to know.
Yeah.
And what it does is that a poiki, because it's cast iron, is porous. The surface is porous. Okay?
Yeah.
So if you're putting in pork fat, it's got a certain viscosity. It doesn't like to flow that much. But when you heat it up, it flows, and it flows into the pores, and it stops the surface of it getting into contact with the environment. So you're separating them out, and then you're not getting corrosion. If you use oil, the viscosity might be too low, and also when you wash the poiki, and I think you're not supposed to wash the poikis. But when you do, the oil can get taken out of those pores. But with the fat, the viscosity is a lot higher, so it's more difficult to take it out. And therefore, the next time you're just adding some of it. When you wash it, some of it comes off. But when you're adding more, next time it lasts. It's a very good method to keep your poiki.
Exactly, but
I was thinking that I must come and inspect that poiki at some stage with you.
You know what? You and I need to sit down and do a podcast. And once we do the podcast, if it is possible, we should be doing a poiki. Also at the same time.
You exactly reading my thoughts.
So now, let's say there's matriculant or somebody that has just matriculated.
Yeah.
And they were thinking they don't know what they want to do. And now they're listening to us. They're thinking, okay, these people are talking about corrosion, and it's something that is intriguing.
Yep.
And I want to study this thing. So what are the challenges that they're going to face?
Okay, so there is an institute called the Corrosion Institute of Southern Africa.
Okay.
And they have education processes, and they have an education course which is going with coatings, so paints and heavy duty coatings as they call them, and then they've also got some which they have on what we call CP, and CP stands for cathodic protection. That electrochemical means that. Now there are other methods of corrosion as well that they can up their ante with, which is like material selection and then also use of corrosion inhibitors to package something. You know, have you ever gone into a store somewhere, or you put something in your garage for storage for a while, and you come back and it's all rusted?
Yes. Yeah.
So if we used a temporary corrosion inhibitor, a rust preventative, we could stop that. You know, you could take it off the shelf and it can look brand spanking new. So they give courses that teach you the basics of it. If you want to go further, and there are some exciting developments that are taking place right now. I'll allude to that a little bit later. But if you want to go and learn something and become a corrosion professional or specialist, a good place to start is metallurgy. So you can study metallurgy, which is obviously the metals. But remember, that only tells you half the story. The definition of corrosion is it's a reaction of a material, typically a metal, with its environment. So if you're only studying the metal side, you need to take cognizance of the environment as well. You know, you can put a piece of stainless steel in an environment and it won't rust and it'll look nice and sparkling, but if you put it in the wrong environment and you don't protect it properly, stainless steel will rust.
I wanted to, you know what, you just reminded me of something. But I'm talking about old people, right?
Yeah, not like me. Yeah?
No, I'm way older than you. There was this old man, right? I'm Venda, by the way.
Okay.
So he used to keep, the clay pot, a big one.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But he would have this very clean and shiny steel that he will put it in, and this is his claim, that the water is much more nicer and sweeter, and it quenches the thirst if that thing is in. I don't know how far through was it. Is there some truth to it?
So when you're putting something into water, there's a lot of processes that can take place. So for instance, if you just take steel and you put it into the water, it will tend to rust. You'll get it out rusty, especially if you've got a bit of salt in that water. Okay. Now looking at the structure of clay has a lot of pores in it. Okay, and when you put water into clay, you can mold it, and it becomes malleable. So you can turn it into something. But it's also got very high resistance to the corrosion reaction. So it increases the environment's resistivity, or the resistance to the charge transfer that takes place. And I'm probably talking over a lot of people's heads here, so I don't want to go.
No, but at least I'm following you. I understand.
Okay, good.
Because I'm asking this question because, now that I'm old, I'm thinking that could have been very dangerous.
It can be for some people, because there are people. Most of us have. Okay, let's just say that the steel will corrode. It will rust. Okay, and some of it will get dissolved in the water, and some of it will stick on the surface. Now, that taints the water with a little bit of Fe2 plus and Fe3 plus, which are the ions, and that can change the flavor of the water if you have enough of it inside there. The issue is that some people have a lack of iron, and then there are people in this world that have too much iron, and I always say that they are corroding on the inside because So it will change the flavor, and if you like that flavor, then great. But
Okay, that's the one question. The second thing that used to happen, and I'm not sure, a friend of mine, if he's listening here, Mangwata, if you're listening, please just give us a call, because there's this thing, fruit trees. Now, if you want it to be to bear like big ones, for instance, let's say an avocado.
Yep.
So you need to go and get a piece of iron, and you hit it into the tree and you leave it there.
Yep.
They say it's because it's providing the
nutrients,
and all of those things. That's the reason why. But there are those that are saying, but you're also killing the tree at the same time.
Yeah, you see, it's let's say you take a poison and you only drink a tiny amount of it. You're not going to die. But if you take too much of it, you will die. So it's the same type of thing for the tree. If you put too much of it in, then the tree might have a problem. You know that some food preventatives like sodium benzoate, we can have 87 milligrams of sodium benzoate and in 1 kilogram of rat, and then half that rat will die. So if they take 100 rats and they feed them that amount per kilogram, half of them will die.
Okay.
But the other half will survive. So that's only 87 milligrams. Yet if you take some other substance and you, like salt, that same figure is 3,000 milligrams, so 3 grams per kilogram. So you can feed a lot more of that. So it's the tolerance of the material plus the activity of it that plays a part.
I like the example you gave, though. No, because it's live example.
Yes. So that is a test that they do in some of the countries. Yeah, unfortunately, the rats don't all.
Yeah,
like
well, yeah, those guys, they are not as lucky as us humans.
Absolutely.
Because we make that. I wanted to talk about something.
So just to finish off that part, then. So when you hammer that knock it into the ground, the steel spike, you're releasing some ions and anything else which is in the alloy of that, and that gets taken up by the tree and it changes it. So it's a nutrient for the tree and it will add fruit-bearing capabilities or not.
Okay. No, which then makes sense.
Okay.
Right? Because I come from the land where, my yard in Venda, you
can put a broom in the ground and it will grow.
Yes, because I've got about 24 trees, but they're still, small.
Okay.
This question I'm asking, because all these questions, I'm asking questions that relate to things that I've seen.
Yep.
You've got, a gate, for instance, where instead of painting, they coat it.
You mean they galvanize it? Or
I think it's galvanizing, but they use it's like a spray that coat it. It's not paint.
Okay, so the difference between paint and where do you draw the line between paint and a coating is not so clear. And
no, I wanted to ask that question because the other one, when it goes out, looks like a bit of powder.
Yep.
The other one,
okay,
liquid.
Yeah. So in that particular case, when they make like aluminium coating, it's like these stanchions in front of us. They aluminium powder coated. Okay, so what they've done is they've electrostatically charged the piece of aluminium that they've extruded. They've manufactured that element, and then they've put it through a powder processing plant. And what that does, because they put a charge, an electrical charge, an electrostatic charge on the piece of aluminium, it now gets drawn. It pulls the powder to the surface, and then you bake it, and you melt it, and it sticks on the surface. So that would cause it to give us that smooth, nice surface of powder coating. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
But you can paint that too. Okay, so you could paint over that as well. So a liquid. Just think about a paint. It's so convenient. It's in a liquid form, and you can carry it up a ladder. You can do everything. Instead of, imagine if you had to paint a wall and we didn't have paint. We had sheets of resin that we had to carry up and put. It's just not convenient. So,
but what is contained in resin is you just said something that I always had an equation with regard to. Yeah.
So paint, for instance, consists of basically 5 elements, and the first one is the resin. It's always got a bit of resin, and then it's got a solvent. Okay, something which will make that resin liquid. Sometimes the liquid and the solvent and the resin are the same material. Okay, and then we add things like pigments to give it color, but in the corrosion side of it, the pigments are the things that actually give it corrosion protection.
Oh,
okay. So they're like little platelets of pieces of aluminium that lie flat on the surface, but they're held in place by the resin. okay? And then we have additives and what they call extenders. And I always say extenders are what, when you go and buy that contractor's PVA at, I'm not going to mention any names.
It's fine. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks. Yeah.
But when you go and buy them, and they're always on special, when you want to paint your wall, you have to put 10, 15 coats of paint over it because they've put extenders in it to make it cheaper and to play around with the viscosity and things so that everybody can use it. So my advice as far as paint is concerned, buy good quality paint and you'll use less and it'll last longer if you put it on properly.
Oh, okay.
So it's those 5 things, but resin is just the chemistry. It's like an epoxy or it's a polyvinyl chloride or a chlor rubber or something like that. So it's an actual resin that they've made. Okay, even like fiberglass resin that they paint things, make things with. So and the resin, like in the powder coating here, when we've heated it, the powder up, it starts to melt. And when it starts to melt, it becomes liquid, and therefore it starts to fuse with and react with each other, all the different particles, and they then form a film around whatever you've coated.
This is a very intriguing subject, to be honest with you. We are on the internet. We are on the World Wide Web. It is www.vmcplanetradio.co.za. If you want to get in touch with us, the number is 071-560-0639. You know what? I'm tempted to say I am chilling because, I'm chilling with Mr. Greg here.
I'm also chilling. So.
Yeah, so that's the number you can be able to get in touch with us and also ask us a lot of questions. If you do have questions, you can just send a WhatsApp and then we will get Greg to answer this question.
As long as you read it to me, because I left my spectacles.
Okay, it's fine. I'll read. So, there was one thing that I was told I must not let you go without. I will remember the question. It's very simple though, but it's a bit hectic and difficult. But when I remember, I will ask you, this question. So let's talk about the process. Oh yeah, now I remember the question. Before I forget again.
Yeah.
Now the question was, there are times where if you live still, let's say in a place for a long time, and it has been bolted and you cannot be able to loosen it. You've got now things like chemicals, like Q20, for instance, that you just have to spray it then.
Yeah.
Basically, when it cannot get loose, has it welded? What's happening inside?
So first of all, when you put two materials which are of the exact same composition together and they're clean, they will tend to start welding, and I'm using that term loosely, but they will tend to stick to each other. So typically we have slightly different specifications of materials that we put together. So the bolts and the nuts are slightly different, and then the elements that we would bolt together, like let's take a Eskom's pylon, okay, and they are bolted together. And so we call those bolts and things that keep things together, we call them fasteners. Okay,
fasteners.
Yeah,
yes.
so we fasten them together and we build the structure. And if we want those things to last, 30, 40, 100 years, quite frankly. And they're out in all types of weather and environments. So what do we do? In that particular case, often they are galvanized. And galvanizing means that you've taken the steel and you've dipped it into molten zinc. And zinc has that ability to protect things by the method of cathodic protection on its own. And then it also forms a passive layer, a layer which is reacted on the surface to its lowest energy level. Remember I said in the beginning it goes down to that. So we get a zinc carbonate film on the galvanizing, and that prevents it from corroding further or rusting further, or it slows it down again. Unfortunately, we can't stop rust completely, but we can certainly slow it down significantly. So in the case of the zinc carbonate, if I damage that surface, if I scratch it, if I don't do too bad a job, it will sacrifice itself, the zinc, to protect where I've damaged it.
Oh.
And it will also reform the zinc carbonate layer. But the zinc carbonate layer is a reaction of the zinc on the surface with water and carbon dioxide in the environment. And that takes a bit of while. So it takes about, from the galvanizer, it takes about 6 months typically to form completely and over the whole surface. If you had to take that same piece of galvanized steel and put it in Walvis Bay or in Durban on the Bluff, it would be eaten up for breakfast by the environment before it forms that layer of zinc carbonate on the surface.
Which brings me to this question, because, I was a very good friend of mine, once told me that, you must never buy any car from somebody that comes from either Cape Town or Durban.
Yeah.
Why is that?
It's korokoro.
Is it because it keeps on corroding because of the humidity, or is it because of why?
So first of all, let me just say right now that the technology as far as coatings of car panels and things have developed tremendously over the past 15, 20 years. They are so good nowadays. But when you have an accident, and you've now damaged it and it's now dragged off some of the paint, then you got another problem. Now you got the underlying, what we call substrate, the steel, exposed to the environment, and then it will rust if the environment is an issue. Remember I said that you can start your education with metallurgy?
Yes.
That just tells you about the metals, but you can also do it with other things like chemistry and chemical engineering to learn about environments as well. So now we're dealing with the Durban environment and the Cape Town environment, and what we have there is they are close to the sea, and they're different. In particular, we have the Indian Ocean on the eastern coast, which is a high temperature. Well, it's got warmer water than the west coast, and therefore the evaporation of the water is easier in the eastern side of the country than on the western side. Although I'm kind of like lying a little bit, but I'll explain what I'm going to say there.
Okay.
And so from a temperature point of view, and a bit of wind action and everything, the water from the sea gets evaporated, and it now comes inland, and it has that high humidity. So all along the eastern coast, from probably about from Port Elizabeth upwards, we have relative humidity in the weather that's often way more than 70%. And 70% is the critical thermal or temperature at which we get the accelerated onset of atmospheric corrosion. So now in Durban, you have a little scratch on your car, or you have an older car that hasn't been painted so well, and now it starts rusting because the environment has got a high humidity. But now there's something worse, and that is that we have salt in the air. So with the waves throwing up water into the air and the wind blowing through it, what does the wind do? It evaporates the water out of it. So when I say it evaporates the water, that means that the water gets dissolved in the air. You can't see it. Okay, but you know that we breathe out mist and that, and you see the droplets. So that's what happens. Okay, it gets dissolved. And what happens? What gets left behind? Salt in the air. So you've evaporated the water, and it leaves tiny crystals of salt. And they are so tiny that they don't just settle down immediately under gravity. They take a while. So now the wind blows them up to 5 kilometers, even longer, even further inland, and you get extremely high corrosion rates. Now, typically, there's an ISO standard which says, we've got a C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, and a CX. And as you get to the higher numbers, they are more corrosive. So Durban area and KZN and Richards Bay and Amanzimtoti and and all of those places, Impangeni, they all have very high relative humidities, and they also have high salt content. And because of that, and even Maputo, you have high levels of corrosive environment. And there we have easily C4s and C5s and even CXs, which are the higher level of corrosion. Cape Town, on the other hand, has got two winds, typically. It's got more, but the two main ones in the summer, it's got the southeaster. It blows. It blows. Have you been down to subjected to?
Yeah, I have been to both.
Yeah.
Look, I'm in my, I don't know if I qualify to say in my previous life, but I'm 50 now, so yeah, I've lived for about 5 decades.
Okay.
So I used to work for the railway.
Okay.
Now, if you look at the rail tracks,
Yes.
and you look at the train tire,
Yeah, the wheel. Yeah.
the wheel.
Yeah.
We use the language tire because maybe we want to be sophisticated, and stuff like that. So, but you'll find that mostly if it becomes too hot, it becomes very difficult for train. It becomes like bumpy and stuff. And when it is too cold as well, it's also a bit of a trouble because that's where a lot of welding has to take place. So if you look at, does corrosion plays part there? Does it impact those?
It's not really the corrosion side, which is normally a chemical reaction or electrochemical reaction that takes place, and that's what we look more and say is corrosion. But if a track gets warmer, or if you've been welding on a track, and if you've seen them welding, they use those thermite welds. They put aluminium oxide in there.
And
then they light it, and it just melts down as such. And that is a very high temperature. And you'll find that the train tracks in that area has got what we call a heat-affected zone. So when you've heated it up, it changes phase. When I say change phase, like let's say water has got three phases. And the one is ice, it's a solid, then it's liquid, and then it's a vapor as the steam goes. So we have the same with metals. But remember, we've added alloying materials. So it's not just iron, it's iron and carbon. Plus, in the case of rail tracks, it's manganese as well. And that manganese makes it tougher. And they now get different phases in the material. So when it's molten and I rapidly cool it, I capture that structure, that crystal structure of the metal in the metal. If I cool it fast, if I cool it slowly, I give it enough time to settle down at its and to form the transition to go down to a lower or to a better phase. So yes, it can affect it, but I think that's more of a physical thing than anything else.
I'm very much intrigued. And if you have noticed, I'm just asking now random questions because
that's fine.
I'm looking at the fact that I'm never gonna get through everything.
I've been involved in corrosion for close to 40 years, and I'm never going through everything.
So the steel we get it from iron ore, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And they will heat it up to forge it and to do.
And that's all physical metallurgy. How you manipulate the oil and the oil, the iron, the metal to form and to give it special properties. You can make it harder. You can make it softer. You can make it more flexible by adding additives and also by heat treatment. Yeah.
So the question that I want to ask is that if you go to a place that is like have a lot of iron ore.
Yes,
right?
Sishen or those places, yes. Yeah. Lots of ore.
And when it rains there and all of that. So what exactly happens to the ground? Does it... I don't know if I will ask this question the way I want it. Right? Yeah. But does the place erode? Do you have like something that you will say this thing can it corrode?
So if you've got iron ore already in the ground, that's what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay. Remember what I said. What is corrosion? It's going down to its lowest energy level.
Yes.
So however old this earth is, that iron has been lying there for billions of years.
Okay.
So it's had enough time to get completely down to its lowest energy level in that specific environment. So it won't corrode further. It's already in its stable situation.
Oh, okay.
But if we change the environment, let's say we now, it's a swampland and we dry it. Now it's no longer at the environment's not the same, so it can corrode further. It doesn't have to, but it can. So us as humans, we change things, and then we wonder why things like the metals corrode. Yeah, which is wonderful, isn't it?
Although I'm still thinking about that poetic cause of mine, and pot of mine.
Yes, I like that.
You know what happened? Because I did not know what I need to do.
Yeah.
So mine, I used to put water and close it.
Oh, yeah.
Then I realized that it had formed a layer of corrosion.
Yep.
And it cut me when I was trying to clean it.
You would be you now know that it'll cut you, but you'd be very surprised at how sharp the edges of something that is corroded. And it's covered in rust. And when you knock that rust off, it can be as sharp as a blade. I found that once in Orapa. I went up there to do a survey on their plant. And walking through the plant, I knocked off some rust, and there was a piece of shiny steel underneath it. And if you had walked into that, it would have cut your leg to the bone. That's how sharp it was. So it's not always the case, okay? But in this particular one, it happened to be like that.
You know what? It's very, very interesting. It's in fact, I want to then sit down with you. Some other time we have to arrange. But I'm glad that today we discussed quite almost everything that I wanted to know. Because you see, this thing of Q20 used to confuse the hell out of me.
Yeah.
To say, what is it which means they would have made something that will eat up the corrosion.
Well,
and that corrosion in itself is still part of the steel. And you were talking about carbon and, all of those things.
So I don't want to push any of my own products as such, which we do have a company that makes it.
No, you can push it, it's fine.
Okay, because we make something which is like Q20 on steroids as far as corrosion is concerned.
Yes.
Q20 is a good product, but it's a penetrant oil, and it stays on the surface, and it creates a barrier against the environment. So if something comes and takes it off, like you got exposed to a lot of rain or water or oil or something like that, it will dissolve it. However, the products that we have, we add a corrosion inhibitor, which will actually stop the corrosion process from occurring by reacting and interfering with the corrosion process. Not just a barrier that stops the environment coming there. And the inhibitor in the stuff that we put in actually diffuses to where it's needed. We can, let's take this room, for instance, here.
Yeah.
If you have a lot of stored spares or something in here, and it's an area which would corrode, which will cause rust to take place, and one of my clients right at the moment is busy with that. So we can take all the spares, and remember what I said about the thing in your garage that rusts?
Yes.
And we can either individually wrap each one up with something, or we could spray some spray on it, or I can modify this environment with what we call a vapor phase corrosion inhibitor. Now, a vapor phase corrosion inhibitor is something which will sublimate, which means it goes from a solid directly into the gas phase, and it will saturate this air that we are sitting in right now with a minute amount of corrosion inhibitor which is in the vapor phase. And that, whenever corrosion wants to start taking place, it will preferentially react with the inhibitor to make it simple. There are others that will stick on the surfaces and everything like that. So I can modify this environment to make this whole room non-corrosive. And then you're going to say, but we're sitting in here and we're going to be breathing in all the fumes and everything. Well, 3,000 milligrams of salt will kill 50% of the rats. And we're still happy with that. However, of the vapor phase corrosion limiter, they're about 2,870 milligrams. So it's very close to salt, and we keep on eating salt. But we use sodium benzoate as a food preservative, and it's only 87 milligrams of it will kill half of the rats. So it's a pretty safe environment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, which is actually very interesting. Now, there are times where you find these guys are welding.
Yes.
And before they weld, they will take a steel brush.
Yep.
Is there a reason for it?
There is definitely a reason for that. You know, you've got oxides on the surface. In fact, what we even do with the heavier plates of steel when we're welding them together, when we're joining them together, is we actually prepare the surface. We actually cut away a chamfer at the edge of the weld, and we put the two pieces of steel together, and then we fill that chamfered V with everything. So an oxide layer on the surface impedes, and it makes it less likely for you to get a better weld, okay? Although you will burn that off, but also you might have oil or grease on the surface, and when you're welding that, it produces hydrogen and carbon dioxide and other types of things which actually go into the weld, and it makes the weld porous, and you have porosity, so it could be a weak point. So yes, there's a very good reason for cleaning that. You don't want things on the surface that you're going to be putting in. There's a specific type of corrosion called hydrogen damage or hydrogen embrittlement, and if you have water on the surface and you're putting an electrode on that to weld, you're hydrolyzing the water and you're producing hydrogen and oxygen. And that hydrogen can go into the material. It's a very small molecule, and it can form hydrogen gas, and it's like blowing up a balloon. You can't believe it, that a little bit of hydrogen can break steel. You know, you put bolts and nuts into something, and the next morning you come back and all the heads of the bolts have fallen off. And that's because it's either reacted with carbon and the hydrogen inside the steel, because steel is actually carbon and iron typically. And if you have enough of carbon in there, it can form methane gas. And that gas inside the material can blow up like a balloon. Well, I'm exaggerating, obviously, but the pressures inside can be so great that it can break the steel. Fascinating.
Now, it is. Okay, before we go, I just opened the, okay, now they're giving me the admin. It says, okay. Sometimes this thing disappears, eh? Okay, let me just go back to, because I was seeing some questions, but I don't know what happened. The Corrosion Institute of South Africa, right?
Southern Africa, yeah.
Yeah, or Southern Africa, yes,
Yeah.
right. I see they've got courses.
Yes.
They've got basic corrosion, cathodic protection, and it's
Correct.
1 and 2.
Yes.
And then they've got coating inspection program.
Yes.
And a senior certificate in coating inspection. So then this interesting one that I see, in fact, two interesting ones. They're talking about the management of corrosion.
Corrosion management, yeah.
Yes. And they also have corrosion in water industry.
That's correct, yes.
What's that?
Sitwe, yeah. So let's get to Sitwe first of all. So with the municipalities, they deal with our water and our water infrastructure and that. And, you know, there's huge amounts of leaks that sometimes occur in our infrastructure.
Yes.
And that's mostly due to corrosion. Of course, we have excavators that also damage it, but corrosion causes the pipes and that to rust through. And then we have water leaks all over the place. So how to solve it? That course goes about how to deal with that. The corrosion management course was something which it's good that you say that, but I myself and a guy, the late Bob Andrew, actually set that course up, and we it was started off as the economics of corrosion, because the decision makers in most companies are the guys that control the money. So we thought, let's aim a course at them so that they can understand that they mustn't just cut on corrosion when it goes tough and the maintenance of that things. But it then became corrosion management. That course I think is a certified it's an accredited course as well. So there's also the paint applicators course, which you haven't. You spoke about the inspector. Okay, there's licensed courses from overseas, and then we also have our local courses like corrosion engineering, which gives you a very broad.
I see it here. Yes.
And those are very good courses to go on. And we are trying to push them further and further now. We're busy with quite a lot of new developments, and one of the things is that, and I'm letting the cat out the bag a little bit, but the current president of the Corrosion Institute and myself had a little chat yesterday about this, but it's been coming a long time. I was president a few years ago.
Okay.
But it's just one of those things, I suppose. But anyway, we are now talking to EXA, Engineering Council of South Africa, so we can deal with the corrosion aspect of the engineers, and an engineer will have to be registered to be able to perform engineering work. So all the technologist or the technician, they are all governed by EXA, Engineering Council of South Africa. And corrosion is one of those things which goes across the whole spectrum of engineering. You get it in rebar, so in the civil engineering side, it's an electrochemical process, and we use transformers and rectifiers and solid state software or hardware nowadays to stop corrosion. So there's electrical engineers in it. Imagine you have a body implant now, titanium, and it corrodes inside you. Are you going to be happy? I don't know. You won't even notice it, actually. In fact, they do find that there is elevated levels of titanium in some people that have had these inserts for many years. We don't know if it's bad for you, but we know that it does happen. And so civil engineering, electrical, chemical plants, metallurgical side of things, it goes across the whole spectrum. So where does EXA put it in? And they said, well, you can be a professional engineer, but you can also have a specialist in the corrosion side of things. And that's coming now. And it's going to be something which, if you're not qualified, you won't be able to and not registered, you won't be able to practice in corrosion side. It's yes, it creates barriers, but it also creates structure and a career path for people that can grow from there. So what's the basic part of corrosion? Everybody likes to paint things to stop it from rusting. So we have surface preparation on a SAQCC, South African Qualifications Committee. And the corrosion side of it, we have courses which we are talking to Masita at the moment, and Masita is developing a career path for people that can come through from blasting right through to specialist painters, etc. And that's to create a career path for people, because at the moment, how do you get a person that can do surface preparation? Well, you find him dancing next to the side of the road with a paintbrush, and you say, okay, come. And then when he does a bad job, you think it's his fault. No, he hasn't had the training to do the industrial side. So we're trying to put that in place.
Okay. In closing,
yes. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
I get carried away.
No, it's fine. That's why I see there's a need for us to, still sit and talk about this thing.
Yeah.
Right? When we talk about corrosion management,
yes,
doesn't that also help a lay person who happens to, interact with steel in their life, in most cases, to say, okay, this one, I don't want to paint, but I want to keep it the way it is, but I need to manage it.
Yeah, so the corrosion management is teaching you the basics of corrosion, and then what processes can you put in place to stop or retard that corrosion from taking place. So the layperson can use those principles and say, well, you can come to the Institute or Corrosion Hub, which is another part, and you can speak to somebody about how to solve the problem and to stop or retard the corrosion from taking place on the one side and not on the other side.
You know what, Greg?
Yeah.
Thank you so very much. You are a star. You are one of those people. If we have to use the correct English words, we'll say you are gregarious in nature. So yeah, I find it to be very interesting in terms of the knowledge you have and how you share your knowledge, which is actually a very good thing. I felt like I'm a student here and I'm learning. I'm in class. But thank you so very much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me. And I love teaching. So anything that I've got, I'll hand out. Okay.
So he imparts knowledge wherever he is. His name is Greg. And then I forgot to ask you the surname, because the other day we gave you a wrong surname.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Combrink.
Combrink.
C-I-M-B. Yes. I've been called by my students Comrade, Combrink.
I like that. His name is Mr. Greg Combrink, but you can call him Mr. Comrade as well if you feel like he doesn't. In fact, he told me it doesn't matter. You can call him anything you want to call him, but don't call him late for lunch.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so very much. We really appreciate up until we talk again, we meet again. It's been nice. It's been fun. I enjoyed this discussion.
Thank you, Stan. I enjoyed it even more than you. And I'm looking forward to that poiki.
Oh, yes.
When I look at the rust. Okay.
Yes.